other assistant then does all of the prop paperwork, and I only do the deck paperwork, the rail, the flies, and so forth.
And that happens a lot in community theater. On the bigger musicals, we'll have separate, you know, ASMs that will take those tasks. But usually in our community theaters, I'm doing the paperwork for all the departments. When I froze up, I was trying to say, like, I'm trying to teach my ASM to do the tracking, because it's an art. It's really hard to figure out how you want your paperwork set up. I've seen so many different.
I'm gonna tell Rhonda. Rhonda, you keep pausing, just so you know, you're pausing.
I'll switch.
Okay, you're pausing just a titch. So, okay. Not sure where we left off. Did everybody get a chance? One of the things you guys have mentioned a couple times, and I'm not sure if all theaters do this, but you've talked about tracking. I know I use tracking sheets especially for props, I use tracking sheets. For those who are unfamiliar with tracking and tracking sheets, why don't you explain what you're doing and how you're using them?
I wish I had the last show that one of the shows I stage managed last season was The Great Gatsby at Pit and Balcony, and we had, the set was just 6 platforms that all nested inside each other and then moved around. I love making tracking sheets for my crew. So prop tracking, costume tracking, that's all fine. But the crew tracks, the who starts where, it's choreography to me. And I ended up with these color-coded crew tracks based on who was moving what platform where and when. And I wish I knew that this question was happening, because I would pull them up. But I had a crew of, I think, 8. 3 of them were dedicated crew members, and the rest of them were ensemble members. So there were actors and crew members, which usually I hate, but it worked out really well for this show.
Anybody else? I know I love when I use color coding, and I just love watching all the colors come across the paper. But go ahead, Brett.
I was going to say that in the bigger companies, in the bigger houses, also at Opera Grand Rapids, we give them sheets saying what has to happen, and then it falls to the crew chief or the department head, whether it's the head carpenter or the head prop person, who decides who actually does what. That isn't usually something that in opera that I have to figure out. It's usually the IA guys who figure all that out for me, thank goodness, because typically we'll load in on Monday morning and do a tech Monday night, and there just isn't time for me to get to know the crew. And there's a bunch of times when I've done a show that is pretty much a remount, and so all of that stuff is already kind of tracked out. Like last year I stumbled into something new that you've never tried before. I stumbled into stage managing Light in the Piazza at the Lyric Theater of the Lyric Opera in Chicago. I got that job 2 days before rehearsal started, but it had been done at Los Angeles Opera the year before, and I had this fantastic paperwork that I was then able to pick up and figure it all out, give to the crew, and they just did it. And the cast was doing all the changes on that, Amy, thank God. They knew what they were doing, because a lot of the cast members were duplicates too. Wait, the bicycle, where'd the bicycle go? It went off, but where's it, what? You know, and the motorcycle? Wait, we got to get that out of the way, you know. So,
Okay. We have a question from Larry Nielsen. Do you or your assistants or someone else coordinate with front of house during intermissions? So explain how you handle your intermissions and making sure that everybody stays on track, on time.
well, more often than not for me, it's a walkie-talkie going out to front of house. And they will check in. Frequently, the front of house person can actually get into the light booth, not always, but sometimes, and they'll go in and say, we're about ready to go or whatever. But if I'm lucky, they're on walkie-talkie and I can say, front of house, are you good to go? Or they'll tell me 2 minutes, and then I know that I can start my process of getting the conductor ready and all that kind of stuff. So yes, very much it goes through me to the front of house.
Yeah, at the Grand Rapids Civic Theater, we have headsets, and those headsets are connected with the front of house. I personally always take a stroll out there close to 5. I'm confident that my ASM has backstage all set up and going. You know, I do the preliminary check on things, but my ASM, you know, is also there to supervise, make sure people are. when we're about 5 minutes to, I usually jump out there and just check in with them personally before heading backstage again. And some theaters don't have that luxury where you can stay backstage and communicate with front of house. So sometimes it is walking there, but I always talk to front of house before a show starts. I always connect and find out who my house manager is, because for a lot of theaters that changes, you know, they have a rotating group of people that do it. They don't always have one dedicated person. So one of the first things I do when I get there before a show is I go out and I say hello to the front of house person. I ask how it's going. I ask how big of a house it looks like for tonight, if they've already had any gifts or flowers dropped off for my cast and crew. I always try to make that personal connection before we even get started with them.
Yeah, because you also want to make sure that they don't open the house before you're ready, particularly if you don't have a front of house curtain and you've got a last minute emergency where a prop guy has to go out and replace something on stage or something like that. So I always make sure they do not open the house until I've given them the go, or I've told them when the curtain touches down, you can go, or whatever, you know.
Opening early was almost worse than opening early at intermission.
Yeah. Our house managers are always our board members. And I love my board, but they all think that they know what has to happen. And so they often will just open the house and I'll be, you know, sweeping the stage or something. I'm like, what are you doing? No. It's one of my biggest pet peeves is when the house manager will decide to open the house without checking with stage management first. So I am also trying to make sure that I'm doing the rounds, and touching base before the show starts and also at intermission.
I've done some corporate gigs, and one of the things we have here in Grand Rapids is called Laugh Fest, and I stage manage one of the theaters regularly. I stage manage over at Wealthy Street for the comics, and I always have to go back and tell my comic, we're holding because the bar line is out the door. And that's one of the things, because I don't have a house manager that's a situation where I don't have a house manager. I just have these poor little volunteers who are trying to sell beer as much as they possibly can and as fast as they can. And that's always that second show for that comic. And usually those are the people who are the rowdiest, and you can't get them because I don't have a team. I'm also then the person kicking them out of that theater to get them to go home. And if it's a comedian they really love, then they wait outside, and then I'm the security to get them from the back door to their Laugh Fest car as well. So it's always interesting. Jamie, you were going to jump in as well?
Yep, same thing for me. Just super important to make those connections so that way everything's kind of smooth.
Yep. The next question comes in from Matt. Where do you stand on stage manager's kit that you personally bring with you? And what is one of your must-haves or always have items?
Ticonderoga #2s.
Eraser.
Ticonderoga, #2 pencils. It never fails. First rehearsal, an actor forgets their pencil. But then I get the golf size pencils. If you're gonna forget your pencil, you just get one of these guys. But that's the thing that you will always find in my stage management. Ticonderoga #2s and mints, because gum on stage is the worst.
Oh, Jamie, what's your must-have?
Those are really good ones. Definitely pencils. And mine's flashlight.
Rhonda?
Chocolate.
Yeah, I knew that the answer to that one. I knew the answer to that one. Here's another one that comes up. How do you handle an actor that refuses to respond to places calls but never misses their entrance? Anybody? So you've called places, they don't come, but then they never miss their entrance.
Yeah, I send one of my assistants to the dressing room and ask them and just have them wait there until they come. So then the assistant can tell me on headset they're on their way, and then I know it's good to go. I did have a friend who was stage managing one time, and she would page the soprano for Butterfly to the stage, and she would never come. So once she just started the music, which I think was rude. I would never do that, but it was fairly comic to hear about it later. It was a good bar conversation for later, but rude.
I actually have a particular actor in mind who I would escort to the stage. I was their personal escort, which is embarrassing for them. So it didn't last very long, but I tried sending an ASM. That didn't get me very far. They were kind of rude to my ASM. And so I went myself. They had a little bit earlier time to get out there because I needed to be back at my booth, but I escorted them to the stage. And I think it took 2 escorts before we didn't have that problem again, because everyone saw the stage manager escorting them out there.
Another thing that happened to me years ago is I was doing a Jesus Christ Superstar in San Diego, and the guy who was singing Caiaphas, who was being covered by the other priest whose name I can't remember, he was always late to the half-hour call. And I didn't like this. First of all, he knew what his call was and he didn't come. But the producer said, just when he does get there at 7:35, just tell him he's not going on, because 3 times in a row I had gone to the cover and I'd say, okay, he's not here yet, you might be going on, which just made him a nervous wreck. But then he never did. So then once this guy wasn't there on time and the producer said, go tell what's his face that he's going on. And I told the guy, thank you very much, you're late, but we're putting on the cover, I'm really sorry. And I wasn't at all. So.
Amy or Jamie, anything to?
I don't know that I've ever actually, I'm trying to think if I've had that problem. Like not even responding to places. I mean, I think that I get thank you places and then people who don't move, but I don't think I've ever had somebody not respond at all. I know that if I did, it wouldn't go well, but I don't think I've ever had that.
Yeah, same here. We usually just do places, and then if we see somebody's missing, then obviously they get the escort. But yeah, I mean, I would say definitely in the Broadway situation, you do have that power of the producers. So if you do have that hierarchy to where somebody can say, hey, do that. So there are obviously repercussions, because, we all need to respect each other and be there on time. But if you don't have, somebody else who can go on stage to do that role as an understudy, then yeah, absolutely. We're usually hunting those people down. But usually in my case, they've been like, oh crap, I heard places, I'm so sorry. So usually they know that they're in trouble the second somebody goes and looks for them.
Yeah, that's true. This show that I was working on in San Diego was an equity show too. So that was another reason why I had the producers able to back me up.
Now, the same thing. Go ahead, Rhonda, sorry.
I was just saying, when you're working with professionals, there's the fear of losing your livelihood that comes into that. I think it's a little different in a volunteer situation because, we don't always have an understudy that can go on. We don't always have another person. And some people, kids and adults alike, will test the boundaries of what they can get away with. There has to be a point though where this is it. You make this choice, or we're going to have to do something different.
Yeah, here's a really weird question. Has anybody ever lost an actor during a show?
Lost in what way? Like misplaced?
He left the building. He didn't have a comb, so he left the building and he went to the nearest drugstore, which downtown Grand Rapids at that time, there wasn't any drugstore. So that meant he got in the car and he left the building to go buy a comb. And I wasn't the stage manager. I was actually house managing that time. And our poor young stage manager was just out of high school, and he calls me on the headset and he goes, we're gonna have to hold. And I was like, why are we holding? Well, I'm set, the lobby's clear, go. And he goes, no, we've lost Jerry. And he was dead serious. He was literally standing, the stage manager went out to the street to go look to see to watch for his actor driving back, because that was a very weird situation. That was an equity actor who came back to community theater and thought they were, God.
I have one thing to add to that, because I think sometimes actors don't realize that, for example, if they have a 7 o'clock makeup call, they have a 7 o'clock makeup call because someone else needs to be done at 7:15, and then somebody else has to be done at 7:30. And it's just rude to their colleagues. And sometimes I've used that angle talking to them. I'm really sorry. We can talk to the makeup people and try and switch it around, but you need to be here on time. Otherwise, everyone's backed up and it's rude to your colleagues. And sometimes that will appeal to their kinder side, and they will start showing up on time.
Right.
I went during one show, the intermission, I had gone to the lobby to check in with the house manager really quick. And as I was standing in the lobby, I saw one of my actors go sprinting past the main doors. What? he was putting change in the meter. He had realized that he hadn't put enough change in, so he snuck out and he went around the other way because he thought he wouldn't get caught, but he went right past the lobby doors in his costume to put change in it.
Yeah,
He
this is a great question because this is different for every single theater. Heather's asking, when do you take over running the show? So when does that show become yours? And I guess I'm going to tag on to that and say, how many of you are sitting in the rehearsal or actually attending auditions as well? When are you coming in? I guess, so here's the question. When are you coming in? When do you start? How much of that process are you doing? And when do you take over the show?
Our stage managers we are part of the casting conversation. So stage managers are at auditions and are part of the casting conversation. Generally, I mean, I do it this way, and so stage managers that I've trained do it this way also. They stay out of the casting conversation except to say, you know, to talk about conflicts on an audition form, or maybe somebody's attitude in the lobby, or, you know, just those kinds of, these are the things that I'm going to have to deal with as a stage manager. And so this is my feedback on this person. But beyond that, all artistic casting responsibility falls on the directing team. And then we're here for the entire process. So we're taking down all of the blocking. We're here for off book. And then the show officially gets handed over. I do a 10-hour tech, an all-day tech. So most stage managers who come through here also do. Some of them split it up in a couple days, but whatever that first tech is when pretty much the show is handed over to stage management. The director at that point is just kind of there to provide a little bit of feedback. They take over again during dress, but that is the stage manager's show at that point at Pit and Balcony.
At most of the theaters in Grand Rapids, it's pre-production when the stage manager starts working on something. I feel that it's really important. You know, the biggest part of our job is communication and helping this collaboration between the director and all the designers. And that starts before we even get into rehearsals. So for me, I feel like it's really important that we are there early on in the process to meet and work with everybody and help to get that ball rolling and to keep that communication rolling. As far as handing the show over, that, like Amy said, is tech weekend typically. There's a bigger collaboration and I don't know if you say a process, but the director and the stage manager really work together on that tech weekend, and it's slowly, the cast sees the control is switching. You know, before, the directors really led most of what's happening, but when it comes to the tech stuff, you know, I really step in more. So you're on a level playing field, and they see it twisting a little bit to where now, okay, now I can see that I'm responding more to the stage manager first. And then, you know, I'm there through post-show. It's pre-production to post-show for myself. You know, I make sure everything gets wrapped up. I personally always stay through strike. Some shows we assign people to work on. It depends on, you know, every theater does it a little different. Some, the cast and crew stay to help strike. Some they don't. But I usually, I'm one of the last people to leave the theater when a show closes even.
I have a question for you, Rhonda. Do you have, for every one of your shows at Grand Rapids Civic, do you have your design teams picked? We often don't have our designers until, right? I mean, like auditions.
Grand Rapids Civic Theater is pretty big and has a set staff.
Okay.
So on our main stage productions, we have a regular staff that does all the shows. On the 2 children's productions that we do for the main stage, that's a little different. They usually hire a costume designer separately to do that. Who else do we hire for the children's show, MJ?
Usually costume designer, music directors. Music directors are usually asked far enough ahead of time that we know who's going to be the music director for each show, but it varies. Music directors are different.
You have a managing director and associate director that do a number of our shows, but a lot of times the children's shows are guest directors, and there's usually 1 or 2 main stage productions also. The stage managers are ever changing.
Stage managers.
the stage managers change every show. I specialize in children's theater. I do a lot of the children's theater productions myself.
In the opera world, we would come in on a Monday typically, and the singers have already been hired, sometimes years in advance, depending on which theater I'm working in. And I don't do the big ones. I'm usually doing smaller and regional, although I have done some of the big ones. But in opera, the singers all come in knowing their roles cold. Sometimes they've done it before, not always. And we have a sing through the very first day with the conductor and the staff, and we sing through and we start staging the next day, and they're off book, which I think is somewhat different than the theater world. And then if the singer is insecure in any way, or if the conductor doesn't like the way they're timing it out or whatever, then we'll schedule coachings in and around the staging rehearsals. But we jump into it right away. And typically in the union situation, in the AGMA, which is the union for ballet and opera, we come in a week and do a week of prep, sometimes two, but usually only 1 week of prep, at which point you prep your book, you listen to the music, you do 30-second timings in the book and basically get to know it. And if the show's a remount or whatever it is, you're really well versed in what the scenery looks like, what the changes were that happened before, who was wearing what costume, when did the changes happen, and sometimes you even know how much time there are for the quick changes. And we get all that pretty much in order the week before we jump in on Monday. But in the smaller regional companies, sometimes I come in on Sunday and have a bit of hysteria on Monday trying to figure out what's the set? Yeah, and the sets are usually done. We're not working on them, we're working in a rehearsal room, taped out floor, of course, and we don't see the set until 2 weeks later. But never for casting.
Yeah, the few times that I've done opera, it was like a 3-week process total. You know, at Civic Theater, and a lot of the community theaters I've worked with, a main stage production is 4 to 5 weeks of rehearsal period. Musical, more like 8. But opera always scared me. I was like 3 weeks. But you're right, a lot more times that people come in already knowing what they're, what they know the music.
90%, yeah, 90% of the time they know it.
Yeah, and on most of our shows, we're handing them the scripts and the music on day 1. We don't have the experience.
Right. Another question that's coming in, and is there a difference? Let's see. Is there a difference in what you do when the cast is all children, or with a good number of children in your cast? So I guess the difference is how you handle a show with children.
You have a wrangler for starters, one person who keeps track of all the kids, makes sure they're getting into their costumes, helps them with their warm up, gets them, when I give a 5-minute warning on the processional in Tosca, that person is in charge in getting them to the stage, at which point they hand it over to my assistants who cue them and keep them entertained. But yeah, they're never left on their own backstage.
Jamie, is there anything you do different with kids?
Nope, same thing here.
Yep, Wranglers. I know we use Wranglers. Amy, you use Wranglers? Yeah, Wranglers. Can't do a children's show without those Wranglers. And we use a lot of moms. I mean, for community theater, we use a lot of the moms. And I know opera does too, because when I worked for Grand Rapids Opera, I know I was always dealing with the moms there as well. A question that Sally, Sally actually has 2 questions. Sally has a question. How do you handle opening in an outdoor performance? That's her first question. Let's handle that one first before I jump to our next one. But how many of you have done outdoor performances, and what's the difference in your opening procedures? Amy.
As far, I would ask for clarification on the question, just like opening the show.
I would say opening the show, because you don't have because
you don't have the doors and the lobby and all that.
Lobby and that communication that you have inside.
So the outdoor performances that I did was Shakespeare in the Park. So it was free to the public, kind of come and go as you please, bring a lawn chair. And so for us, I think if I remember correctly, we had some volunteer ushers that helped people know, where they can put their seats. We had some entrances from the park area. But mostly it was, we started when we started. We advertised the time that we started, and the lights happened, and there was a curtain speech usually. And that's pretty much how people knew that we were opening. And every now and then, because we were in downtown Miami, you had to deal with car alarms going off or somebody being a jerk in the back of the house or whatever. But And that's not something that you have to deal with in a show in a building. But a lot of times that was a volunteer usher going to tell someone to please be quiet, and if they couldn't, they would have to leave, kind of thing. But for the most part, people who were coming to see the outdoor show knew what they were there for, and listened to the people who seemed like they were in charge. I have no idea what I would do for an outdoor production that wasn't gated, that had an admission. That's for somebody else to answer.
Anybody else done some outdoor productions, especially recently? We did do, Grand Rapids City did Whitecaps out at the ballpark a couple weekends ago, and I guess I was kind of like the house manager. It was interesting because the very last show we were watching the rain clouds come in, and we're watching the radar, and it's like, do we even load them in? Do we not load them in? Well, we'll load them in and we'll see how far we get. And I literally stood there with the phone and watching the radar. So it's a totally different experience doing it outside, that's for sure, because you have so many different things to think about of what's out there.
We also did the driveway cameras, which was not a big performance, but it was outdoor, people's driveways, people's backyards, up to 25 people is what they were allowed to have. And as the stage manager, I would just get up right in front of the whole group and, say, ask my host, do you have everyone? Are you all set? Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. I would recommend a giant gong, though, some kind of noise, like if you're going to be in an outside space where you don't have lights to dim, or you don't have someone, it's amazing if you just, make a sound, or even put an actor on stage. Everyone will automatically get quiet as soon as they see that. Like a curtain speech, especially when you're outdoors, I think it's nice to have someone do a live curtain speech. Just have them go stand on the stage. People will notice and they will be quiet. But I love the idea of a gong, just saying.
I like the idea of gong just to have the idea of a gong. Just to get people's attention. Sally's second question is their theaters having trouble getting stage managers? So how do you, or what could you give as suggestions to recruit stage managers for community theaters?
Do you have a really great stage manager? If you have a really great stage manager, get them an assistant. The best way to learn is to do it. And I think that it's the people who are excited about organization, and you look for your helpers, the people who want to be around but not necessarily on stage. And I think that stage management is scary for a lot of people because it's a big job. But the most important thing is to just be supportive and let them know that that it is a big job and that you're asking, but that you are going to support them with whatever they need. That to me is the most important thing. But I think if you've got somebody or a couple people who are really good, get them assistance.
That's a really good idea. And also the whole idea of, like, I know dozens of people in the business, and when I can't do a gig, I'll call my friends. So people call me and say, I'm looking for a stage manager. Can you do it? Because even if they don't want me to, they're going to say that anyway, because they know I'll recommend somebody else. Because none of us want to recommend somebody that we don't think can do a good job for them. So who's had a good stage manager before? Don't be afraid to reach out to somebody else in the business and say, do you have anyone to recommend? Because they almost always will.
I would also like to suggest students. I'm always a big advocate for students. If you have a local college, they don't even have to have a theater program. If they have a theater department that is doing shows, usually they're doing one show at a time, and they probably have more than one student who would love to stage manage. Reach out to the college and give them an opportunity. Look at the high school students and the college students that are already working crew for you. We can find adults too, but I always like to make that push for the kids. They've got to learn somewhere. So find that crew person, that kid that always shows up on time, that's always there with a great attitude, and say, hey, would you like to be an ASM? I think you'd be great. I constantly recruit backstage. I get Mary Jo shaking her head because I do. Constantly like, this kid is fantastic. We should have them do this.
Plus, all of us probably have checklists. I know when I was teaching, I had like a 3-page document that was a description of duties. And that's a good place to start because people are going to go, I don't even know what a stage manager does. And you say, well, look this over and then let's talk about it. Yes, you post a sign-in sheet. Yeah, I mean, it's all little stuff, but the good attitude, Rhonda, you've really got the right idea because it's people with a good attitude and positive, want to be helping that are going to turn into good stage managers, right, team?
Yeah, look for the one that's sweeping the deck before you even get in.
And observe, and who's observing everything that's going on around.
Mhm.
We also started a stage management class, part of our education program that we started teaching. So it's those young, it's only for upper, middle, and high school students that they can come in and kind of learn. And then those are the positions that we are using as ASM or trying to, or even crew. Can you, let's see, can you tell us any special or unusual things you have in your stage manager script that work well for you? Is there something unusual or special, I would say, that you do in your script book that maybe people would be curious about for prompting? Or Jamie?
I always loved when my stage plots. So with my larger musicals and I had to do blocking, like those were always super helpful. And I did like set stickers. So I would make little stickers out of like the furniture pieces, and then I would print them on sheets, and then I just stuck them on the plots.
One really good trick that I started doing when I was doing opera is because sometimes you have these incredibly long sets of warnings, warning fall spot number 2 to pick up so-and-so, number 3 to pick up so-and-so with this color, blah, 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 stand by on the scene change, blah, 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 blah. So I would find the place in the music that was about as far ahead as the cue had to go from when I could start talking. So I will put a warning for something on the previous page, like 18 bars before. So by the time I'm done with that string of warnings, I don't have to watch the music. When I'm done talking, I'm right where I need to be to give the go, or a few bars ahead, so that I'm not trying to talk and run out of time to say, and go, by writing it, you know, pages early. But in an opera score, I know every 30 seconds of my score. So I know if I've got a set of like 10 cues I have to be warning, I can start that 20 seconds ahead. And then by the time I turn the page, I can say, everybody, go, and be calm about it. I just discovered that like 10 years ago and thought, why didn't I think of this before?
At the front of my script, I have my blocking key, and on my blocking key, you will find those circle garage sale color dot stickers. And I add to my key, whatever I have the most stuff usually goes to Katie Dreer for lights, because she gives me so many lighting cues. So that'll be like, I'll write on a yellow sticker, lights, a green sticker, you know, fly. And so throughout my prompt book, every cue is a different color, and it just, I can look ahead and kind of see, you know, there's a lot of lights coming up, or there's a lot of this coming up. I love color coordinating everything, and I just love the stickers.
Yeah, I'm a color coordinating girl.
Everything has its own color.
Yeah. Jamie Peterson asked if any of you ask people to stage manage before they're allowed to direct. Especially if they're first-time directors. Anybody ever have experienced that, or have people who you're asking them to stage manage before they direct? I would assume to have them understand what the stage manager is going through.
I think that's a different skill set, and I also
Yeah, I don't think it's the same.
Insisting that someone stage manage before they direct implies that, this sounds terrible, but implies that we're lesser in a way. I like the idea that you have to know the idea of everything that's going on to be a good director, but I don't think stage managing is the way to learn to be a director. It's a whole different skill set.
I agree. Having done both, I absolutely agree. I prefer stage managing, but it's a completely different skill set.
In
completely
opera,
different art.
Stage manager, yeah. In opera, so frequently an assistant stage manager will move into assistant directing and go that way because they know they don't want to call cues. Instead, they want to be a director. But stage managing to director, I think that's different.
On that same line though, like if someone wants to ask me like a piece of advice for someone who is going to be a stage manager, wants to be a stage manager, I would tell them to learn the other jobs in the theater. I would say spend time, you know, working on the costumes one day, spend times with a prop master. You know, it's so important for us to be able to communicate with those departments and understand the jobs that the different people have. So I think if there's someone that was interested in directing, it wouldn't hurt to have the, not necessarily make them be a stage manager, but it wouldn't hurt for them to observe from the stage manager perspective what we do with our job, so that they understand better how to work with a stage manager. But it's the same for all departments. You know, I think that's one of the best things I could have done, is learning more about props and costumes and trying to design things myself, because I understand more of what my designers are looking for, and where they have concerns or questions, I'm better able to answer those.
Great. This is a question for me, one that I wrote down earlier. So I always like talking on the God mic, and I call it my goddess mic. But in that kind of a realm, what superpower, what superpower do you as stage managers possess? So what is your superpower as a stage manager? Ooh.
You're not looking for invisibility here, are you?
No, I'm not looking for invisibility. No, sorry, not invisibility. What's your superpower as a stage manager?
Organization, multitasking.
Multitasking, organization.
Sense of humor.
Sense
And
of humor. I think my cast is on a break right now, so I had to put my mask back on. But needs anticipation, I think is mine. I love it when a director, when I am walking back from the stage and director looks at me and says, I was just going to ask you to do that. That's always, I think that might be my superpower as a stage manager, is anticipating needs. I also think it's important, especially in a community theater setting, to be able to figure out how to toe that line between the authority figure and the friend with the cast. I know when I started out, I was very much thought I needed to be the cast's friend, and we're going to be buddies, and that's how you're going to respect me. But then the director didn't respect me, or I didn't respect the director. And you found that place where we could kind of coexist in this authority and friend situation, which is an interesting place to be.
Rhonda, what's your superpower?
Communication and creativity. I don't think everybody thinks of the stage manager being artistic and creative, but I think there's a lot of things that we do in our job that require that. And especially those spur of the moment mistakes, or I keep thinking we had a fire start on stage one, like that instant reaction that is not freaking out, but like calmly being able to communicate to everyone what needs to happen and to keep things going. There's really there's an art to calling cues.
Another question just came in. If you had one piece of advice for a director, what would it be?
Trust your stage manager. Period. Trust them.
Trust them. I agree. There's a lot to that. Nothing I hate worse than having a director fly backstage and it's like, I already have it handled, just go away. Just stop.
Well, a similar thing is the director should think ahead, I think, on a daily basis, and not just be winging it, but also thinking about what the next thing is going to be happening on stage in order to communicate it properly to us so we can make it happen.
I would say a big one is a lot of times I feel like directors will say, okay, you're going to exit off left, and not think about like where something ends up. The hat got left over there, or they brought the purse on and it's stitched right. You can't just think about moving the people. You also have to think about the stuff that is being moved around them and that they are moving. And sometimes I think the directors get really into that zone of just moving the people back and forth. Start planning right now. What do you want them to do with the purse? Don't wait until tech and go, oh, we have a purse to take care of.
Yeah, or if they've got a quick change for their entering on stage right in 1 minute, don't have them exit on stage left, because then they have to run all the way around, get winded, and then change their clothes and get back on.
Yeah, those exits and entrances, they really should be planned out.
Yep, same thing I was gonna say.
This is an interesting question, and we're starting to wrap up here. We have just a couple more minutes, but this question is what question did you expect that they haven't asked yet?
How are we handling COVID?
No
No
one
one.
opened that can of worms, Rhonda. I think we're really happy not to have to answer that question.
We don't have time for COVID.
I was expecting, what's the most important thing you've learned? And for me, it's I never raise my voice in anger. I learned that from a veteran actor when I was working in Miami. During a tech, I yelled into the God mic and I used quite a few choice words. And the actor on stage, who was not doing what I wanted her to do, stopped everything, looked me dead in the eye and said, "Excuse me, if you want people to respect you, you will have to respect them. And speaking to them in that tone is not a way to respect them." And I've taken that with me, and I teach that to all of my assistants. And I try to remember that all the time. The only time I raise my voice is to be heard. And I never raise my voice in anger, which means that if I'm real quiet, I'm real angry.
Jamie, what's the question you thought that we would get asked and didn't get asked?
I guess our path story, how we got where we were today.
Okay. Brett, what did you think was going to be asked?
I thought they would ask me about how we're dealing with COVID as well, and are we finding what has to change? And I haven't done anything, so I don't know, except for what my friends are all doing.
Right.
I'm
Yeah,
just
as we start to re-enter into this world, and Amy's in rehearsals right now. We have some rehearsals going on here this evening at Civic. It is a whole different world. We had a workshop Monday night with Patrick Hardy, who is a disaster planner. There's a lot of guidelines that you have to set up. There's a lot of procedures that you're going to have to follow. The disinfecting and the different ways of staging things and just moving along is just a total different world than any of us ever thought we were going to be into. So yeah, it's a question and a concern. So hopefully we can all learn from each other. And I think there might be the last question that we have. I think actually we answered that last question. So I'm going to say here, it's 8 o'clock. I want to thank Amy and Jamie and Brett and Rhonda so much for participating in this. This is so much fun for me as another stage manager. I've met some new friends with Amy and Jamie. I've known Brett, and I've worked with Brett in corporate world and in opera world. And I always say Rhonda's one of my kids. So I've known Rhonda for too many years. But I want to thank you all so much for participating, and for our participants that are still with us. I don't know if Jamie Peterson's going to jump back in or not, but I just want to say thank you to everyone for joining us. Please let us know if you have any questions. Contact us at ctamthrives@gmail.com or go on to our website, ctam.online. And please join us for tomorrow's workshop and then on Saturday. Jamie Peterson, were you going to jump back in? There he is.
Fantastic roundtable tonight. Absolutely love listening to everything you guys had to say. You can really tell you're well seasoned. You're well seasoned and experienced, and we love that. Thank you for sharing your gifts with everyone tonight. And I just want to say to all of our attendees, thank you for the questions. It's so great to have the interaction. And I'm going to go out on a limb and just say, it's not just that we learned from the panelists, but I'm sure they got to know each other and learn a little bit from one another as well. I'm so glad you joined us. I'm so glad that CTAM could offer this experience at absolutely no charge whatsoever. Our fall conference looks so much different than it normally does, with us doing it on the computer and virtually. And I encourage all of you to visit ctam.online. If you're not a member of CTAM, gosh, I sure encourage you to become one. And if your theater is not an affiliate member, I would sure hope you would talk to your board and consider that. We've got some great stuff on the horizon, planning more of these virtual webinars and roundtables, and we'd love for you to be a part of those as well. So thank you for joining us. Ladies, you did a fantastic job.
Great. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
And yeah, thank you all so much. Have a good night, and look forward to talking to you soon. Bye.
Yeah, thanks. It's a great group. So glad to meet you all.
All right. Bye-bye. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.